to take pictures, whatever, just don't have any flash in their camera. But the second that they peeled away the flap, your
Nope.
iris is just dull. And then everything went white. I couldn't see anything. It was just light, right?
See,
Yeah,
I would
just
have
like
that moment where I'd be like, okay, well, this is my new reality. This is now what life is going to be like from now on.
it's funny too. His doctor, he's like, this shouldn't hurt, but it's gonna feel really effing weird. And I was like, okay, thanks for the heads up.
Man, crazy. Well, good for
Yeah,
you.
but yeah, 2020, first time in. I don't know, I was wearing glasses for 7, 8 years. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
I'll tell you what, though, driving at night with people that some people that don't turn off their high beams, I'm like looking into the face of God while I'm driving down the road. Like, oh,
Take the wheel. Take the wheel, Jesus.
yeah,
right. Jake, I bought your book earlier today.
Oh, you did? Wow, that's kind of you. Thank you.
So I'll add it to the collection.
I appreciate it. Yeah, you don't have to read it. You've bought it. That's all that I care about.
Oh no, I'm gonna read it.
Oh, good.
It's you got an interesting topic there. And
Thank you. I really
can't wait to dive into it today.
Sweet.
It'll be amazing. But what we typically do is we kind of just hang out for up to about 5 minutes, let everybody gather into the live stream. So we are streaming on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, X.
Awesome.
And if you go over on the right side of your screen, you'll see a little chat bubble.
Mm-hmm.
You can bring that up, and on the very top, it'll say live stream chat. That
Great.
will bring up all the imported chats from all the
Wow.
services that we're
Yep.
on. The only thing is that you can't reply to it on here.
Okay.
So if you see a question that you want to answer, by all means, just call out the question, say, hey,
Great.
or we'll often bring questions to your attention from the chat as well.
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay. And then I can go in here and I can also do this where it shows up on the stream.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yep. So like Kristalla says, Jeremy loves his books. I do love my books. I love my books very much.
Rock on. This is
Kristalla.
great. Okay, perfect.
Apparently, I'm Kristalla.
yes, you are.
You are. I mean, that's what it says right here.
Or it says Crystal AH.
Kristalla.
Ah,
I like
yeah,
Kristalla better.
I mean, that's pretty much how you spell Kristalla.
Sounds very
He's got his own
ethnic.
producer in his room.
Yeah, I got a producer off screen here for me.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, we'll give it one more minute. Twitch is packing in right now really nicely.
Yeah, they got to figure out how to get the X chat because the X doesn't feed into this chat. I don't know why. It doesn't do it on my channel. Doesn't do it here.
Really?
It's like the only one that's broken. It
I
seems
wonder
like.
how many chats we've missed then.
And to be
Pretty
honest
messed
with
up.
you, we're not even getting all of the chats because I've noticed that on my channel. Like, I'll look at the actual like platform that I'm streaming on, like YouTube or whatever, and like I'll see comments there that don't feed through. So the Riverside still needs to like button that up so that we're getting like 100% of the chats come through. But
Yeah, Jeffrey does his own podcast too.
Nice.
Are you wearing your tinfoil hat beanie?
no, it is silver lined. It's not tinfoil.
Oh.
Is it in the drawer? Yeah, it's in the drawer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Whoa!
All right, I'm upgrading from tinfoil to silver,
Bougie
boys.
skeptic. Ooh.
You'll see. We're all completely different personalities, Jake.
Nice.
It's a nice mix of personnel here.
A rogues gallery. That's great.
Oh yes. All right, so you guys ready to roll?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, Jake, I got a nice little intro written up for you, so I'm gonna
Oh,
read
wow.
that off first, and then we'll jump right in. All right.
Sounds great.
Alrighty. Welcome back to the Infinite Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Jeremy, and tonight we have a special guest, like we typically do. This one, though, is going to dissect a very interesting and current event-related topic, AI, and a lot of the aspects of AI that you're not thinking about. So, today, we are thrilled to be joined by Jacob Ward, a veteran journalist, author, and thought leader focused on the complicated relationship between technology, science, and human behavior. For years, Jacob has served as a correspondent for major networks, including NBC News, where he reported on technology and its social implications for shows like Nightly News and The Today Show. His extensive career includes work with PBS, CNN, and Al Jazeera, and he previously held the position of editor-in-chief of Popular Science magazine. He is the host and co-writer of the landmark 4-hour PBS series Hacking Your Mind, which explores the science of decision-making and bias. Most importantly, we're here today to discuss his work on his critically acclaimed book, The Loop: How AI is Creating a World Without Choices and How to Fight Back. In The Loop, Jacob warns us about the unintended consequences of artificial intelligence on our free will and decision-making, offering a vital guide for navigating an increasingly automated world. Jacob, welcome.
You guys,
to the
thank you.
Rabbit Hole.
I really appreciate you having me. This is very exciting.
Good. So AI is your bread and butter right now, and I know that
yes.
you've done a lot of work into psychological topics, right? Especially influence. How'd you get into all this? Let's start with the very beginning.
Sure. So I really appreciate you guys having me. And so I've been a technology correspondent for a long time. And once upon a time, technology correspondents were sort of expected to be just kind of upbeat nerds who thought only about like which phone is better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And around 2013, when I started working first for Al Jazeera and then I did this PBS series, I was thinking more and more about technology as a kind of reflection of society. I had an early mentor who used to ask this question a lot of the time. He'd say, what is the technology trying to tell us about ourselves, right? We build stuff specifically to address something in ourselves, a vulnerability, a market opportunity, whatever it is. And so as I was starting to think about that, I had this opportunity to do this PBS series, Hacking Your Mind. And Hacking Your Mind was a 4-hour kind of crash course in about the last 50 years of behavioral science. And I got the opportunity to travel all over the world and interview all these people who study why we make choices the way we do. And what the basic takeaway of that series is, as is the basic takeaway of the last 50 years of all of this behavioral science, is that a huge amount of our decision-making, probably 85 to 90% at any given time, is totally automatic and based on very, very ancient instincts that we share with primates, like, choosing who to trust, what to eat, where to go. One big example of this is like if any of us, right, so I just spent the weekend driving my kid from volleyball game to volleyball game. If I'm assigned to drive my kid somewhere, it's as often as not, I might just automatically drive her by accident to school because that is the standard route you take every morning, right? And so I don't know how often you've been in the position, right? You guys have like, you show up at the school and you're like, oh wait, this is not where I'm supposed to take her. Oh my God, why have I done this? And the fact is, right, if you cast your mind back across that drive, like you've done an incredibly sophisticated mechanical task with no consciousness at all. You're on total autopilot, right? And that kind of autopilot is what all these behavioral scientists have shown is driving a huge amount of our choices in our day-to-day lives. So at the same time that I was learning about all of that and the way in which those choices that we make are very predictable, that the mistakes we make are very predictable, I was also in my day job as a technology correspondent learning about these fly-by-night companies that were starting to use early machine learning and what was at the time called human reinforcement learning algorithms. This was early AI before ChatGPT became possible. And I thought, oh, this is a real problem. I'm not the kind of person who believes like I have to get my ideas into the world at all costs. But this was a moment where I was like, man, I don't see anybody else talking about the intersection of our vulnerabilities in terms of our brains and our behavior and this for-profit industry that's about to explode around the commercialization of AI. And I thought, you guys, that I was like 5 years early. I thought I was like, way out in front of this. And I had a few people read this book and be like, I don't know, this sounds like science fiction. This is pretty speculative. When we first published the book in 2020, the first version of it came out in at the very beginning of 2022. We didn't even put the word AI on it. because we thought, oh, this is that'll alienate people. People will think this is a book for nerds, and we don't, and we want people to everyone to read this. And then 9 months later, ChatGPT comes out, right? And suddenly my thesis comes to life. And, I mean, I'm seeing my book that was supposed to predict something way out in advance and try to hopefully warn people against it in some way. I was encouraging people to get involved in policy and in lawsuits to try and slow this down. Suddenly it's just taken off. And I have to admit to you that like the last year and a half, I've kind of been in a little bit of a depressive slump, just kind of watching my thesis come to life. I've just been so bummed, honestly, that I've kind of withdrawn from the topic. I've just been like surfing and hanging out with my kids. I got laid off from NBC News last year, and so I've had some severance and some time to just like chill. And now I'm suddenly looking around, I'm going, you know what? I got to start talking about this again. I got to get re-engaged in this topic because it is happening so fast, and it's poised to, I think, transform our world, and not, I would argue, necessarily for the better unless we start making some big moves right now. And so that's why I'm joining you today, is trying to just sort of, I'm trying to have as many of these conversations as I can to say, listen, I don't think our brains are ready for this. That's fundamentally my thesis here.
So which phone is the best then?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all that stuff aside. But, so what, yeah.
I know, right? Exactly. I can't tell you how often this is exactly what happens. Like, I'll get into a long conversation with somebody about like agency and human will and blah, 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 blah. And then they'll be like, and by the way, I'm having some email trouble. Can you help me with my email? So it's really funny.
Well, if you're offering,
Yeah, I know, right?
So you're just like a superpowered IT, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know about all that, but anyway, can you help me with my Ring camera? Yeah.
No, we've recently dove deep quite a bit into AI and the troubles that it poses. Jeff, did you have a question, man? So I'm sorry, bud.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, we've dove very heavily into it. I can guarantee you there's going to be topics that you may not have ever been asked to come out of our mouths today.
Let's go.
It's going to be great.
I'm really excited to hear about it.
Okay. But I want to get everything else out of the way first before we get into, the kind of freestyle questions and everything. Jake, Jeff, do you guys have any questions before I dive into the ones that I have?
Nope. I hope you're ready, Jacob, because I'm the crazy one. So we're going to go deep.
Good.
He
Good.
is.
Good.
He is.
I don't have any questions. I'm just interested in the topic. I'm so against AI, it's not even funny. And I just watched that artificial intelligence movie and Bicentennial Man yesterday, so I'm pretty well versed on the whole
You're
thing.
well poised for this conversation.
Yeah.
He did all of his studying. Look at him.
Yep.
It's the first time he's ever done studying. But yeah. Well, I can't say I'm a huge fan of it, but I can see it benefiting us in limited usages. But I can definitely see the danger that's on the horizon. It's actually terrifying.
Well, here's the thing. I'll just sort of say, maybe this will kind of set off some questions and some conversation. Like I want to say, like, I am not opposed to it, as a technology. I think it's almost always the case for me that like a technology in and of itself is not a problem. It is, so in the case of AI, there are incredible uses, right? And as a guy who used to, run a magazine that was all about foundational science, like the incredible work that can be done with a pattern recognition system made possible by AI to turn, the revolution that made all of these LLMs and generative AI possible, right? Is this transformer model revolution that in 2017, 2018 made it possible to suddenly take huge amounts of undifferentiated data that you could never as a human being sit and sift through and find patterns in, pour it through this funnel and get all these insights out of the bottom of it. If you think of all the things that scientists could pour into a funnel like that, right? Like every single photograph of a mole on someone's back that might or might not be cancerous, right? It's incredible at finding the patterns in which moles, in predicting whose mole is going to turn cancerous and whose is not. You pour all of the, uncharted, unnamed, well, everything's named, but all of the stars in the sky, right? And you look for patterns in how they are moving or what's going on. Incredible discoveries can come out of that. I've talked to people who say, you know, I know a guy who is working on a system. He exclusively tries to make AI systems for either not-for-profit sort of healthcare systems or for like state governments, and he makes no money as a result. And his thing is, you know, he says, if you gave me everybody's birth certificate and everyone's home address, I could use AI to predict whose apartments need to be repainted in advance to cover up the lead paint and avoid lead poisoning in kids. You could wipe out lead poisoning in young kids. You know, like the ability to do incredible stuff like that is enormous and fantastic. But here's the problem, you guys. No one's making money stripping lead paint out of apartments. Nobody's making money pouring stars into funnels, right? That is not how we work in this country. Instead, you're in a world already where the leadership of these companies is saying, and now we're going to start, you know, using this to let you write, you know, erotica or make cartoon porn girlfriends for yourselves or whatever it is, right? It's how you make money off it that turns the technology into something bad. And in my case, you know, I was just at a conference where I was watching presentation after presentation after presentation by people who work in what's called trust and safety. These are the sort of content moderators at social media platforms. And, you know, they were just showing time and again, here, look, here's the photographs that AI can generate that absolutely no one will be able to spot as being fake. Here's the political messaging that turns out to be way more persuasive, not way more, but substantially more persuasive than messaging written by an actual human. And it doesn't even have to be written by somebody who writes the language, who even understands our language. So you just are seeing time and again that this stuff can be used for great stuff, but it can also be used for terrible stuff. And that terrible stuff tends to make us more money. And so that's my big problem.
That's my big pushback against it. It's not that AI can't be used for amazing things, but as a human species, we tend to do the worst things with what we have. And so, you know, my big concern is, you know, the whole deep fake technology. At some point, it's going to get so freaking difficult to tell what's a fabricated photo or a, you know, like if I wanted to make a video of Jacob Ward drowning puppies in a river in order to ruin his life, you know, I could do that in 10 seconds, put it out there, and then you're still going to have people out, even if it's able to be, you know, shown that this is, you know, baloney, it's not a real video, you're still going to have people out there years after the event, like every single, you know, smear campaign that we see, that are going to believe that lie, or at least think in the back of their heads, maybe Jacob Ward is capable of drowning puppies in a river. You know,
and let's say I am.
See if it ruins your life, you know, why not?
Totally. And let's say I am a serial puppy drowner, right? And you catch me with a camera doing it. I'm then going to be in a position to say, that's not me. Look, you can't believe your lying eyes, because clearly we're in a world in which you can't trust video evidence anymore. This is my whole problem with the latest release from OpenAI, which allows people to make these 10-second videos that are all set for, you know, they're perfect for social media, and they're already flooding my social media. You know, like, I'm like, what is the purpose of this? What is it that we needed? What problem is this solving, right? Like, I think we are already not doing a great job with hanging on to what's true and what's not. And to totally, it just feels like it's almost as if the objective is to absolutely destabilize what we can trust and what we can't, so that there won't be any video evidence anymore. I mean, you know, as a journalist who believes that there really is a way to prove a thing, you know, one of the number one ways you prove a thing is you catch somebody on camera doing that thing. Sure. And if that's going to go out the window, I don't know, you guys, like, I'm not sure how we're gonna agree on anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I see that that's like an issue, but I don't even see that as like a major issue personally, because I think that most of the society is kind of already at that point, even without AI. Like, nobody believes anything, right? Or, you know, you have all these different factions of ideas, and people can't agree on anything no matter what. Even if you do show them a real video of something, right? Like, it doesn't matter at this point. So my bigger concern is that the use of AI to sift through and like organize data on us, right? So I know that there's like we all know this, right? Like, we're all being tracked in every way, shape, and form, right? Thank you, Patriot Act. So they're listening to and watching everything that's happening.
Not happening.
Yeah, literally, right? But the problem is, like, they're gonna take it up to the next level. I think, right? They're gonna start using this to track like biometric data on all of us and these
Yep.
types of things. So the control factor from whether it's a government or corporations, like compiling all that data to feed you whatever, that's my bigger concern.
Yeah.
The deep fake stuff is like whatever. Nobody believes shit anyway. So
Well, yeah, I'm not as nihilistic as you are about truth, and I like to believe, I'm trying to do this job still of sifting some truth out of the world, but I absolutely agree with you that like the trust is at an all-time low around that stuff, and so it's going to get even worse in that case. But I 100% agree with you that there is about to be a huge surveillance problem, and that problem, so I think that the government version of it, even if you put that aside, and I'm not arguing that that's somehow not something to worry about, but like I think mostly about corporate actors these days, right? Because the pipeline of data from the incredible amount of information that we have volunteered to these companies in the last 10 years, and how that is about to get poured into these funnels that can find patterns in huge amounts of data, has created an incredible surveillance opportunity for these companies, right? So like once upon a time, the big breakthrough, Mark Zuckerberg's big breakthrough, was this idea of revealed preferences, was the term of art in the social media world, which is, if I look at enough, if I look at you enough, Jeff, and I look at enough other people who are similar to your behavior, I can pick out of your collective behavior some revealed preferences, is what they call it. And that just means like the stuff where if I asked you in a poll, hey, are you into this kind of thing? You'd be like, no, I like this and this and this. But your unconscious mind, just can't help but look at X, Y, and Z when it's shown it. And it's, it's the equivalent of like you drive past a car accident. Nobody would ever say in a survey, I like looking at car accidents, but it is clear from your behavior, the behavior that you exhibit on the social media platform, that you can't help but look at that, right? So you pour enough of that kind of revealed preference data into a social media platform, and they start to build, right, engagement algorithms based on that, and that's how we got into the trouble we were in to start with. Now you're going to have this incredible ability to find meaning in that data and predictive forecasting that's going to let you say this person's going to be way into this and way into this kind of thing. And it's not even going to be a question of funneling, content that that someone has made to you. They're going to be able to just custom generate it, right? So for me, that's one huge problem. And then, like you say, the surveillance part of it. I mean, already there's technology out there that, can turn Wi-Fi signals into an ability to tell how many people are in the room and who's moving around. And, the incredible ability to watch our behavior on an ongoing basis is just going to be unprecedented. And the fact that it's all going to be done, that it's going to be done for money almost makes me more worried than if it were done. For some reason, I'm more worried about it being done by corporations than I am by governments. But that's my own little thing.
I'm with that. I mean, for sure. I've been seeing me and my other co-hosts, we talk a lot about this thing that's been talked about a lot recently, which is kind of weird. Predictive policing. Have you heard this?
Yes, Predpol. I have a whole part of my book about that. Yes.
Like to me, like that ties into all of this data collection and the surveillance state stuff. So like it's literally going to be like Minority Report in my worst case, right? It's like they're going to just look at you and be like, hey, and we can predict based off of all these things that you're talking about. In 5 years, you're probably going to commit some kind of crime, and they'll be able to somehow, work that into legislation, and like it becomes like a whole new world, literally.
And here's the thing that I get really worried about with that is that one of the themes that I come back to a lot in the book is this concept of anthropomorphism, right? Which is the assuming that assuming that a system you don't understand is somehow really sophisticated. So just because you don't know how it works, you assume it's right. It's just a natural human tendency. This is one of those greatest hits of the last 50 years of behavioral science, was learning that one. And in that case, you have these. So the thing about predictive policing, right, is that it delivers. This is true also of like facial recognition systems, is they deliver a conclusion for an arresting officer that, it doesn't explain itself, doesn't say how it came to that conclusion, and saves that person a huge amount of work. And that is an irresistible combination. And so you wind up in these systems where, so predpol, right? Los Angeles used this for a long time, until it was basically shown that it had all kinds of biased results, because it was leading, what it was essentially doing was kind of pre-indicting sections of the city based on past patterns. And as a result, a kid who just happens to live in that neighborhood is going to get grabbed by the police way more often. A perfectly innocent kid is much more likely to get accidentally grabbed by the police, right? And so eventually, LA has now canceled their contract with these systems, but for years they were using it, and it was because everyone just kept saying it's a neutral system, it's a neutral arbiter, it's a blah blah blah. But the truth is, no one really at the front lines of operating that system knows what it's doing, how it's making its choices, and it's so convenient, no one wants to resist it. So that's my other worry about this. I think we're not great at saying, so one stat I bumped into in the book is, I looked at this big study of the big healthcare records company is a company called Epic that it deals with your electronic medical records. And they created a predictive system that will help cardiologists make a priority list of their patients that day based on who's most likely to have a cardiac event that day. And the thing is, it works. It works pretty well. They're getting out in front of cardiac events early. These doctors are able to get in and make interventions early. In a lot of ways you can't argue with it because it really works well. But here's where I get worried about it. I asked the makers of it, so how often, your doctors must be irritated to be told what to do by a system like this. And they said, oh, no, they're thrilled. They're thrilled about it. They don't want to have to make that choice. They love being told what the order is. And I was like, oh, wow, has anyone, and how often do they ask how it makes decisions? And they were like, oh, one guy asked once, and that's it. You know what I mean? And so there, but for the grace of God, right? You might have a system that works really well. You might not. You don't know. But people are only too happy to let the decision get handed off to these systems. This is what our wiring is about, we don't like to make choices. We like to be able to outsource our decision making. It's part of our human programming. And this is the ultimate outsourcing system. And yet we have no idea how it works or whether it's doing a good job.
Do you believe, that's basically a form of triage, isn't it?
Yeah, right. And again, you'd want that to work well, but there was I had a physician once explaining to me that one of the number one causes of malpractice lawsuits is a failure to look at a patient's back, and they'll then get bed sores and no one finds out, right? And the theory going about that is that the doctor is too buried in the chart. The doctor's already overworked, right? Has a patient load they can't handle. They're buried in the chart. They just look at the vitals that are on the chart, and then they say, okay, I think it's this. Let's do this, right? And they just don't have the time or the incentive to roll that person over and check out their whole body, right? It's that kind of thing. And I just worry, at every level of really essential services in this country, you're going to have people saying, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. The AI tells me which suspect to arrest. The AI tells me who to hire for this job. The AI tells me, which of these people I should date, right? We're going to be using these systems in ways that I think are going to wipe out it's going to do to our ability to make good choices for ourselves what GPS has done to our sense of direction. I can't find my way around my own town anymore because of GPS.
Same.
Is this going to be, so I kind of go back and forth on this a lot. Obviously, it freaks me out because we're living in this transitional period, right? We're going to witness it from before. I remember going outside and playing, right? And then now it's we're going into this new world situation. But is it going to be a thing where in a few generations in the future, maybe 50 to 100 years in the future, it's so well developed and advanced that it's actually incredibly beneficial, net positive for humanity, right? We live in some kind of utopian paradise, an abundant civilization because of it?
You know, I mean, that is certainly that's the vision being sold by the companies making it, right? They're all it's the weirdest time to be a reporter because they say things that in the old days, and I'm old enough to remember some old days, would have been an absolute death sentence from a sort of public relations standpoint. So you'll have a guy like Sam Altman saying openly, huge numbers of jobs are going to be destroyed by our creation, you know, and there's going to be big scams that are going to be really scary made possible by what we have built here. You know, and to my mind, you know, but he says it, and then in the same breath essentially says, but it's going to be worth it because down the line there's going to be this incredible, you know, upside for humanity. And I think I would just say, like, again, I'm down for, like, if it were up to me, I'd make it like, let's make it like a 5-year moratorium on commercial use and just give it to the scientists. I'd like to have just scientists use it for 5 years, and then we can start trying to make money off it, you know, and let's see where that takes us first. Mm-hmm. Let's see if we can wipe out cancer, and then we'll start, wiping out, you know, real world girlfriends. Okay, like, hold off, you know, and in the case of, like, already there isn't even evidence yet that it has any kind of real productivity gains, right? Like, there was a big MIT study recently that showed that 95% of these companies that have adopted this stuff are reporting no productivity gains at all. Like, they can't figure out any improvement that's been made. So, you know, it may be that that's the case, but you also have to think about the other kinds of things that the leadership of these companies predict. So one of the things that Sam Altman also has said, he said it in a January 2024 podcast with Alexis Ohanian. He said that he has a bet going with his tech CEO friends on their group chat as to when we'll see the first billion-dollar one-person company. Right. And that's like a dream of theirs. Like, he says it like it's a positive thing. And so I think to myself, okay, well, wait a minute. So if the future is a handful of single person billionaire companies, what are the rest of us going to do for a living? You know, and the dream they sort of offer is like, well, we're going to have a huge amount of free time. I don't know about you guys, but like, this is the United States. We don't like free time, and we don't like to give people free time. We certainly don't like to pay people for free time. You know, like, to my mind, there's no example in history of a time when we've made it possible to do less work and given people, you know, a living for that. Like, it's just, that's not what we do.
Sure. I mean, I do also see, like, I pay a lot of attention to, like, macroeconomic stuff. So, you know, it is also interesting to me that it seems like, and maybe this is just my conspiracy mind itself thinking too much, but it does seem like we're going through some kind of monetary change, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it could be something where they kind of know they're foreseeing that this being an issue. So they're trying to flip, whether it be into like crypto rails or whatever the case might be. Because I know everybody, when AI started dropping, everybody was like, oh, we're going to lose all these jobs. We're going to have to talk about universal basic income. And obviously, like, that doesn't sound too good for anybody who's not just a lazy ass, right? So,
Right. I mean, already, right? You wouldn't want that. A lot of people don't want that. That's right.
right. But if there is some kind of like monetary shift globally, and we stop looking at the financial system the way that we always have, maybe, right? Maybe there could be some way to make all that work together, but
Maybe. I mean, you know, now we're out past the power of history to be in any way predictive. Like, we don't have any examples
Right.
of making that, of that being possible. And so, you know, yeah, maybe down the road there will be some kind of, you know, maybe it'll be the end of fiat currency and we'll all be somehow, I don't know, trading sugar syrup and not worrying about, you know, against some digital currency, and we'll be, you know, and we'll be fine. My problem is that, you know, so there's a thing called the Jevons paradox that really haunts me. So back in the 19th century, a guy named William Jevons was a 19th century, he was a British economist, and he was trying to figure out why it was that the British Empire was running out of coal, which he was recognizing was a big problem, that England itself was going to run out of coal. And his thing that he identified was this weird paradox in which the technology at the time had actually gotten better at burning coal in a much more efficient way. There were these new steam engines that really had revolutionized the efficient use of coal, and yet they were using more coal than ever. And it's become a way of describing that dynamic in all these different fields. So it turns out like the more aqueducts you create to hang on to drinking water, the more we use up drinking water. Like in example after example, the more efficient you are in using a thing, the more you consume it. And that's how I think it's going to be with our free time. I think the more it is possible to give someone free time, the more we're going to consume that free time and take it away from people, basically. I just don't believe that there's a world in which you're going to, you know, make a sort of a free-flowing monetary system and a kind of, you know, super generous social policy that somehow, you know, can work across borders, in which we're cool with people not having to work and AI doing all the jobs. You know, Amazon has just announced, the New York Times just announced that like Amazon's about to wipe out 500,000 jobs. They're going to automate 500,000 jobs according to internal documents at Amazon, right? That's you know, 500,000 jobs, you know, out of like, I think they employ like 1.3 million people. Like that's a lot of jobs gone, right? I don't think we're on a path toward hanging out, you know, and being and living a happy, relaxed life. That doesn't, in my experience, tend to be, you know, in the historical lessons doesn't tend to be the result of the moves of big companies.
You will own nothing and you will be happy, as they say.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, even
So
if we did have a completely automated world, we'd all end up being like those people on Wall-E, just in their
Well,
cars, super fat, staring at screens.
Jake, here's where we're at, right? This is how I think about it. So everyone keeps saying, "Oh, you mean the Terminator? You're worried about the Terminator?" And I'm like, "No, man, I'm not worried about the Terminator. I'm worried about Idiocracy."
Oh,
Yeah.
That movie.
Yeah.
I'm worried about Wall-E. Exactly. It is a world. Now, Wall-E would be okay. Like, I mean, Wall-E is a little bit like what Jeff is you know, suggesting could be possible, right? Like a world in which we're just like, our Slurpees are brought to us and we watch TV all day. Like, okay, you know, all right, you know, I'm not, that's not the worst outcome, but I'm worried about, you know, I'm worried about, you know, something between what's the Elysium and Idiocracy, you know, like a very a very powerful gap, big gap between rich and poor, you know, an extremely sharp pyramid at which only a handful of people get to live at the top and the rest of us are all at the bottom, and no one has the critical faculties to see, you know, to figure out a solution to the problem.
Yeah, and then also the plants obviously craving Brondo because it has
Yeah,
electrolytes.
exactly. That's right, exactly.
So, how worried are you about the concept of a technocracy?
Well, I am worried about that. I mean, you know, so I have a podcast called The Rip Current, and I was trying to figure out what it was I was going to call it when I launched The Rip Current, and at one point I was thinking about calling it NPC, because it's a term that you hear a lot in Silicon Valley at the top level from people. So NPC, right, for everybody, I'm sure who listens to this, to you guys will know this term, but non-player character, right? It's the background characters in video games. It's like the extras in movies, right? And a friend of mine makes the joke that the people running the top companies in Silicon Valley are like your friend who watched Akira too many times and didn't quite get it. You know, didn't quite understand that the lesson of that movie is not that superpowers are cool. It's that you shouldn't have superpowers and that it's bad for everybody else, you know? And that's sort of how I feel about the leadership of a lot of these companies. Like is this idea, you know, that they can joke about the idea of $1 billion single person company. That's the definition of a technocracy, right? That for me is an enormous red flag. And so I do worry about that. I mean, we had a whole campaign here in Northern California where I am based. You know, there's a whole group of people who were trying to build their own tech city. They were trying to basically incorporate a whole part of, I can't remember which, I think it was Lake County, but this rural part of California, they were going to basically just like take it over if they could. They lost, but now they've got a whole new plan to try and co-opt a existing town. You know, there's a real idea in tech circles that like the very smartest are the ones who count. and everybody else is just kind of a user and, a consumer. And that bothers the hell out of me.
What do you mean
Yeah.
by they were trying to take it over? Like make like a 15-minute city or something like that?
They were trying to basically, the concept, I'll do a little subtle Googling while I can here, but there was a whole idea that they were going to create like a sort of tech utopian sort of city. There was also, the rumor mill had it for a while that, at the beginning of the Trump administration, there were some conversations going on around, trying to create some kind of regulationless city in which tech companies could experiment without any regulations at all. And in the big, beautiful bill that passed, at one point, there was a provision that was going to make it such that there would be no regulations allowed on AI at all for 10 years. And states included would not be allowed to pass any regulations on AI for 10 years, right? So there's this clear feeling on the part of the leaderships of these companies that just leave us alone, let us figure it out. I once interviewed the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, and he basically said that. He basically said, policymakers can't be trusted to think about this stuff. They're not smart enough. Leave it to us. We will figure it out, and then we'll regulate it later. We'll figure out what the rules should be because only we are sort of smart enough to do this. This is how I think they think about things.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see that, right? Going back to what I was saying earlier about like maybe at some point in the, relatively distant future, it becomes like a utopian situation. But, going back to what you were saying, if this AI can figure out a way to cure cancer or slow down aging or whatever the case might be, it's not going to be cheap enough for us to use, right? Like those advances are going to be something that only these billionaires, at least I think, are going to be able to utilize that. So maybe that's why they have this mentality, because they kind of in the back of their mind, they're like, hey man, we're going to live the next 1,000 years. The
Yeah,
schmucks
maybe.
aren't. So if
the,
we could just,
the longevity stuff is a whole cultural facet of Silicon Valley, right? There's huge amounts of cultural interest here at that high level in sort of living forever. There's a huge amount of longevity talk.
Yeah.
You've got people who are, taking endless supplements and icing their skin and doing all kinds of stuff because they want to live forever. There's all that stuff is really there. And at the same time, I mean, I just think there's a feeling of, intolerance. There's a guy who's very popular in tech circles here named Curtis Yarvin, and he has a very successful newsletter and is a very successful sort of public intellectual in Silicon Valley. And Curtis Yarvin's whole argument is we need a monarchy. We should have a techno monarchy. We shouldn't even be doing democracy anymore because it slows stuff down. And there are lots of people in the tech community who are into that, who are into that idea. People like Peter Thiel, people like Mark Andreessen, who's a big VC out here. There's a real cabal of people who really believe the smartest people's ideas count, and everybody else is just kind of an NPC. And I think that is a real, which is why I want the utopian idea to happen. But this is the other thing, right? Like, let's say they make an AI-based cancer system. I mean, what they call the capital expenditures on AI, the investment they actually have to make in the data centers, the amount of money being spent on that accounted for 1/3 of the total growth in GDP between last year and this year. A third of the difference between how much we spent last year as a nation, how much we spent this year as a nation, is just in the tubes and computers used to power this stuff. They're investing, tens of billions of dollars, and that money has to get made back. So let's say they do figure out how to cure cancer. They're not going to give it away for free. They're going to need to make that money back. That's what's happening right now. And so to my mind, the commercialization of AI is going to create this incredible pressure to make money. And that's not going to lead them to utopian stuff, it seems to me.
you guys ever seen that show Altered Carbon?
Yes. It's so funny. Those are the books I relax with, weirdly enough. I love his writing.
I can't read, but the show was great, and like this is what it makes me feel like. It makes me feel like that utopian AI-driven world is going to be for those people who live above the clouds, right? It's like you were saying earlier, there's going to be a huge gap between like the rest of us and them, and they might live 1,000 years. They might be able to upload their consciousness to the stacks and clone themselves to continue, like some weird shit like that. But that's what I always think about when I really start thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, totally. I think there's you know, I just think there's a like the problem with our society as we've got it built right now, right? The whole neoliberal project, the capitalist world that we live in, is somebody's got to lose, right? It's not a world in which everybody gets to win. Somebody wins and somebody loses. And the problem has always been, can you keep those things in at least a relative balance so that being at the bottom end of the society isn't like living in a medieval way. It is an okay life, right? We've had that in American history, but this is not the path to that. It doesn't seem to me.
So
This is at a certain point we can also talk about happier topics, you guys. I know I'm such a bummer on this.
Oh,
topic.
no,
I ruin every party I go to.
our listeners are sick. They love the
Yeah,
depressing
you seem
stuff.
like a lot of fun for sure. No, our listeners are pretty gross. Like our toppest or our highest like grossing shows or topics are ones where people are horribly killed in terrible accidents and things like that. They're missing forever and stuff like
Well,
that.
maybe
People
you're
are-
my tribe. Maybe
they're
I've been
sick. They love it.
I've been hanging out with the wrong people all this time.
So yeah, we've talked a lot, just kind of freestyling here, but I want to shine some light on the book. I'm a big book guy, so I always end up steering the conversation, especially with an author, into the topic of their book. So I want to talk about The Loop, right? So which you published, like you said, in January of 2022. You predicted the AI revolution we're seeing now, and we've talked about that pretty heavily already. Not necessarily a prediction, but AI in general. But the subtitle is How AI is Creating a World Without Choices. Now, could you break that down for the audience, and how exactly does a system designed to give us more options or a better experience ultimately limit our choices?
Well, I love this question. So as I said, I spent a huge amount of time looking at both the behavioral science world and then the technology world. So the behavioral science world accounts for about the first third of the book, where I'm trying to give people kind of a crash course in some of the big lessons of the last 50 years and more of behavioral science. And one of the big ones is we as a species, so a lot of this comes from a guy named Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. That was a very famous book for a time. He won the Nobel Prize in economics. He was a psychologist who, beginning in the 1970s with a partner named Amos Tversky, created a whole bunch of experiments that showed that that basically people hate to make choices and will take any excuse to outsource that decision making if they can. And he came up with an idea of this thinking fast and slow idea. So there's a fast thinking brain and a slow thinking brain, a system 1 and a system 2. That system 1 fast thinking brain is this one that, as I mentioned earlier, we have in common with primates. It goes way, 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 way back. It is an incredibly powerful and well-tested decision-making system. And it is the system that allows you to drive automatically to your kid's school without thinking about it.
Lizard
It is
brain.
yeah, your lizard brain. Exactly. That's how we say it. Exactly. That's your lizard brain. And and we're embarrassed typically of our lizard brain, but the truth is our lizard brain got us where we are because you didn't need, using your lizard brain, you don't have to think things through. You don't have to, if a snake comes into the room and we're all sitting together, you don't go, oh, what kind of snake is that? You freak out, stand up. Everybody else in the room freaks out and stands up, and you're out the room, and the tribe is saved, right? It's the automatic ways we make choices, not just individually, but as a group. We transmit, when I show you a mask of horror because the room's on fire, you don't need to see that the room's on fire. You just run, Cedric the Entertainer has a great line about, he's like, when I see black people run, you don't ask why, you just start running. He's like, you can't help but run it, and that is exactly it. Like that's how our system works. So that's all the lizard brain stuff. Our slow thinking brain, our what's called our system 2, what Daniel Kahneman called our system 2, that's the cautious, creative, rational, kind of better, more human decision-making system. And the idea is that like 100,000 years ago, that's the system that caused, back when everyone was living on the continent of what is now Africa, everyone, somebody stood up and said, what's over there? And that's that part of the brain that goes, oh, what else is beyond this campfire? I wonder what would happen if we didn't just think about our survival. Like, what happens after we die? And why did I have that weird dream? Those thoughts are a totally new decision-making system. And that system is super glitchy and, because it's untested. It's like a brand new piece of software in evolutionary terms. So what the estimate is that 90% of your choices are made by the lizard brain, and this little group of choices is made by your slow thinking brain. And my thesis in the book is, if you're a company that's created a pattern recognition system that can tell you what people are going to do in the future, can forecast their behavior and even maybe shape their behavior because you want to try and make money off of them, who are you going to try and sell to? Do you want to sell to the cautious, creative, rational part of the brain that thinks things through, right, and makes good choices? Or do you want to sell to the one that can't help but look at the cleavage picture, right, that can't help but drive to his kid's school by accident, right? The automatic brain that, was like where my alcoholism came from, that they would much rather sell booze to that guy than they would to the guy that I am today who said, you know what, I got to actually stop drinking and I'm going to quit drinking. So to my mind, a system like this absolutely could create huge amounts of choice. We would love that. But I think when you overlay the need to make money off these systems onto it, they're not going to, why would they try and make us more like these people? They're going to want to make us, more like our rational selves. Why wouldn't they want to make us more and more instinctive? Because the instincts are so easy to predict.
Do you think that they've been working towards that already with just the way that the algorithms work, TikTok brain and all
Absolutely.
that, and the
Absolutely.
shortening of attention spans?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I want to say, like, I describe this not, like, I'm not judgy about this because I am the worst person I know around this stuff. Like, I am super manipulatable around this stuff. I'm the one who scrolls TikTok, and eventually the woman comes on with a TikTok branded video that says, you should go to bed now. Like, you've had enough, because like when the bartender says you've had enough, like when the crack dealer says you've had enough, that you are addicted to crack, and he knows you're coming back tomorrow. So I very much write this stuff and think about this stuff, not from a perspective of like, hey, everybody, you got to be smarter. I write it from the place of like, I am not able to resist any of this because it's so powerful, and I just think like we have to, what I want everyone to do, and what I like is that young people are better at this. Like Jeff, you said TikTok brain, like the fact that we're naming that in ourselves, right? Jake, you said lizard brain, like that we're naming that in ourselves. I just love that we're entering a world, and this is where my hope for the future comes from, is like young people talk very openly about like, oh, brain rot. Oh, I got into brain rot. Like they're conscious of how their brains fall for this stuff. And I think the more that we can articulate that, the more we're going to get to a place where not only are we going to be able to say, oh, I got to make better choices for myself, which is part of the solution, but I don't think the main part. I think then you're going to get to a world where you're going to start being able to sue on the basis of, you're going to be able to sue companies for taking advantage of your instincts in a way that you would never choose consciously. That, to my mind, is where the path out of this is probably going to come from.
Man, I got some crazy allegory of the cave vibes from the beginning of that explanation. Plato's what was it? The Republic.
Okay, tell me about that. You're better read than I am. I don't know my Republic.
It's just a small portion of his work called the Republic. Prisoners are locked inside a cave, and they've been in there for so long that they're only allowed to face one wall and see the flames from the fire that's stoking the wall. They don't know how the fire gets fed or anything. They just know that it does. One prisoner frees himself somehow, breaks out of the cave, learns that there's an entire world outside of the cave, comes in, tells them about it, and nobody believes them because their whole life, basically since birth, they were prisoners inside of this cave, and all they know is the shadows cast on the walls caused by the fire. So like when you were talking about, like,
Yeah.
Jake made the reference to lizard brain, then you had talked about there's
Yeah.
a small part of your brain where you stand up and you say, well, what's over there? And a lot of people, some people, right? I'm not going to use figures, but there's a lot of people, and trying to walk a thin line here. A lot of people would be like, don't be an idiot, don't look over there, because there's nothing there, right? Our whole world is right here in this cave, and our everything we know is being cast in the shadows on the wall. But then you have those people that are willing to look outside and say, no, there's a whole other world out here. But then eventually the people all make it outside, and then everyone's so depressed. And that's a great segue into something else that I wanted to talk to you about. Sorry, I'm kind of just jumping topics here really, really quick. But it was a perfect segue. So you had made a point earlier about how we're going to have a ton of free time, or that's kind of the
That's
route
what they
that we're going
promise
down.
anyway. That's what they say that we will have.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you have any fears of, I don't even know if there's a term for it, but the depression that people get when they don't have something to put their efforts towards? You see it a lot with recent retayees, or like Jake and I, we were in the Navy together, and I mean, I went through it, right? I got forced medically retired out of the Navy. And I went through a massive depressive cycle.
Oh, dude, I had a total ego death, and now I just spend every second that I have doing something.
Right.
Yeah, and
I'm constantly busy.
My wife and I wouldn't say we argue about it, but we talk about it all the time. You know, she's like, you always have to be doing something, and it's like, you have no idea. Like, if my mind's not being exercised by a task, whether it's at work or the podcast or hanging out with my kids or something, I go crazy, or I even fall asleep. Right? These guys give me crap all the time because I don't watch movies. I fall asleep to them, and I didn't understand 90% of the references that were made today already. But so that's why I like books. I get my entertainment from books because I can physically do something with it.
Right.
But are you worried?
Oh man, yes. I love this. I think you're touching on something so important. So purpose. You know, there's a whole world of research going on right now around purpose and how important that is to human satisfaction. Because a bunch of these researchers are recognizing that in the future, if, you know, people are going to suddenly not be working, how will they function, right? I mean, this is a whole thing. It's not just about the money it brings in, it's the identity and the value you feel. You know, people really like purpose. And I really worry about a world in which, you know, we have established the idea that the value of a person has to do with their production, their productivity. How much money do they generate? How much value do they generate? You know, is measured in monetary terms right now. And if we're about to enter a world in which the AI takes care of all of that, well, then what is the value of that person? There was a think tank that I went to once that was, all they were trying to think about was, how do we come up with a new way of describing the value of people beyond the money they generate? And to my mind, you know, so I think it's one of the big problems with what you're describing. And it's one of the big problems, I think, with people who say, oh, we're not going to have to work as hard in the future, or we're not going to have to work at all in the future. That feels like a real, like, high school freshman's idea of what, you know, a sort of perfect world is supposed to be. I think we're going to need work and purpose. I think that's a huge amount of a huge part of what has been satisfying about humanity. I mean, you know, we were talking about this primitive brain, you know, lizard brain, and our higher functions. The higher functions, one of the examples I always give around higher functions and why I'm so proud to be a modern human, is all the stuff we've built. You know, the highways and the cathedrals and the bridges, like it's incredible. And the pride people take in having done that stuff. So I just think we're absolutely going to need that in the future. And if we don't have it because we think somehow people are going to be happier if they don't have to do any work, I think misunderstands how economics work, as you know, Jeff, and misunderstands how people find happiness in life.
I'm surprised
sure.
that Jeff hasn't brought up that it. I mean, it seems to me that it's the promises of a more relaxed society, but people are so forgetful that just, what was it, 4 or 5 years ago, everyone was locked inside their homes. They couldn't go to work. They couldn't
Yeah.
do anything of enjoyment, which you do get a tremendous amount of satisfaction from work in general. Whether that's working with your hands or actually doing a job, right? Whatever it might be, but those sorts of things decreased, and our mental health issues spiked through the
Totally.
roof, right?
Totally.
And so maybe the whole grandiose idea of like, oh, less time at work and more time for yourself and all this sort of stuff, but with the knowledge that it's going to lead to insane mental health crises. And why not, right? Look,
Right.
who would want that? Well, I don't know, but why,
This
I
is-
guess
yeah.
we're going to find out.
This
But,
is why, this is why it bothers me so much how casually you have business leaders right now saying, "Oh, we're just going to not need people." Like the damage that will do to society
Yeah.
if they really lay off people the way they seem to want to. Whereas at the same time, like I was mentioning earlier, this guy who says he could do away with lead poisoning in kids if you gave him an AI system, he also has a program. I think it's for the state of New Hampshire. I can't remember, but basically he's got a system that takes new arrivals in the state of New Hampshire, people who have just arrived there, whether they are, immigrants or moved there from another state. And once they register this, get a driver's license or whatever, this system pushes to them, hey, would you like to be a bus driver? Would you like to be, a sanitation worker? What about this? Because there are all these jobs that the state of New Hampshire needs filled that they can't fill. Snowplow drivers and all this stuff, right? To my mind, like, stop talking about getting rid of paralegals and entry-level bookkeeping and all that stuff. Don't do that. Don't wipe that out. We're going to need that job. Instead, use AI to find people work. Use
Sure,
AI to
yeah.
pair people with the services they need. That's what we're going to need, much more than I feel like the idea that we need to be more efficient feels out of whack. That doesn't. I think we've gotten to a place where where the top people in America are making enough money. I think they should take a little break on the money making, and let's get some people some help. Let's use the assistants for that instead.
There's definitely a concern for a lot of these jobs. I feel like, going away with automation and AI and stuff, but I still, I'm a blue collar worker, right? Like I go out and I do tasks that I don't see. I think about this all the time, right? I don't see how an Elon robot can do half of the jobs that I've done in my life, because there's certain things that you just couldn't program into, to do some of these tasks. Now, when you're talking about, a lot of jobs, sure, right? Artists, even musicians, like that's going away with some of the new AI, writers, customer service, like a lot of these things, retail, delivery services, taxis, like, yeah, all that could go away. Waste management, like that could all be automated. But when you start talking about, like service industry, like blue collar service industry jobs, I don't see how like a robot's going to be able to do 90% of those jobs. So it could be a situation where a lot of these people do lose work, but there's so much that's going to be needed in order to like maintain the infrastructure of society that just people just don't want to do, right? Because it's not air conditioned, it's not comfortable, it's it's hard work. So sure, you might have like this problem, but again, kind of looking out into the future a little bit, it may become a thing where it's like, we don't actually have more free time. We just have more people doing things to upkeep the infrastructure that robots can't do.
Yeah, I hope that is true. That there can somehow be a move toward, let's say, enough people in the trades that you could have, that it could sort of balance out. But one problem I have heard a great deal, I was just talking to somebody the other day who's doing a bunch of research right now around the thesis that AI could conceivably do to women who never go to college what foreign offshoring did to men who never went to college back in the 80s and early 90s, because for a huge number of women who don't have a college education, there have been a whole set of knowledge jobs, bookkeeping, clerical, admin, right? That can lead to a really good, reliable paycheck for a long time, and can lead to a real career that then winds up even leading to a really stable retirement. And these are the jobs that these companies are talking about wiping out completely. And so that's something I really worry about. I think you're right that like there could be a push toward the trades. I was just talking to a guy the other day who was really lamenting that his daughter doesn't want to become a lawyer or an engineer, and she wants to be an artist. And I was saying to him, like, I don't know, man, have you seen what's going on with lawyers and engineers? Like, they're getting fired left and right because the entry-level versions of those jobs are going away.
Yeah.
But a truly like disciplined creative person, that could actually be a valuable skill in a whole new way. But I'm always collecting, like, because I worry about my own ability to make money in the future. Like, I really don't know, and I'm too old to go become a journeyman apprentice electrician. So I can't, and there's a lot of people in my position who only have like 15 years left in their working lives who aren't going to be able to make a transition like that. So there's a real trouble there. But I'm always keeping my eyes open for like what is a gig that is AI proof? I met a guy the other day at the airport, and we were sitting waiting for a flight together, and I was like, what do you do? And he was like, I own a chain of barbershops. And I was like, yes, that's fantastic. Tell me about that. So I agree with you, Jeff. I think there will be a lot of jobs that won't get replaced, at least not in the short term, because it just doesn't make enough money. Like, it wouldn't be a cost savings to automate that work. But if you look at the original filings of Uber, the company, the original stock filings all say from the very beginning, we're going to automate this work as quick as we possibly can, right? The driving Uber is going to be absolutely a robot's job in a few years, because because they can do it more cheaply that way. And so as long as they can do it more cheaply by automating it, they will. And I think it, and this is why I think one of the ways, the subtitle of my book is how it's creating a world without choices and how to fight back. We're seeing around the world, people are fighting back. So in India, they have outlawed self-driving cars because a huge number of people in India make their job as drivers. They have said it's illegal to have robots do that, because they know that it'll just put so many people out of work. And, we may have to make that kind of choice here in the United States, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Get in the trades, people. You ain't gonna catch no Elon robot doing underwater welding, not for a long time.
That's funny. I bet if you had Elon on, he'd be like, "Ooh, I totally want to make a robot that does that."
Good
But
luck.
you're right.
It's funny too, because I'm sitting here thinking about it for my job, because I do avionics work on airplanes.
Yeah.
Certainly, there wouldn't be a robot that would, take my job. However, they could use AI to figure out, why are half the lights not working on this, in this cabin of this aircraft, and completely eliminate the need to pay someone who specializes in avionics,
right,
right?
has experience. That's
Right.
exactly right.
So,
That's right. That's right.
Right.
We've seen,
So, I mean,
yeah.
they
We've seen
threw a
this
ludicrous
example.
number at me, because they're like, yeah, well, you got 10 years of experience working on avionics, and that's a specialty role. But if you could get a computer program to just find what's probably the solution to fix this, then you could have any monkey with a wrench
Totally.
figure it out and do it, right?
And like out of the little drawer comes the exact piece machined that you need, and just put
Right.
it here, turn it 3 times. Okay, take lunch.
Yeah.
That's right.
So-
That's right.
We'll see. Maybe
So
I
again,
should
like,
become a journeyman electrician.
Yeah, right. The value of people has got to start getting calculated in a form other than just how much money they can bring in. We're going to need to start defending purpose and human satisfaction, I think, in some new way. And we just don't have a lot of history of that,
Yeah.
Well, ready for a wild question?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Do you I don't know if you've dove into this at all, but you think that there's any connection between AI and the recent massive increase of UFO stuff that's going on right now, whether it be through mainstream media, through independent outlets like us, or anything and everything.
That's really interesting. I don't know if I believe. So I'll just say I don't know anything about it, fundamentally. Like I didn't know about the uptick in reports. That's interesting. I think that there is we're in a new information ecosystem where every single person is kind of a self-appointed watchdog for weird stuff. And that is, I think, in a lot of cases good. There are a lot of good things that have come out of that. And there are also places in which that creates just an incredible, ecosystem for dangerous conspiracy theorists that get us into trouble as a society, I think. So I wonder if I had to guess, I would guess that it is, it might be a function of just how easy it is to report evidence of a thing and have that thing analyzed and amplified by lots and lots and lots of people. Whether, it's one of the things that we've seen a lot of in the last, like what we've seen time and again is that when you can measure a thing more effectively, the rates of that thing go up because we can measure it more. And I just wonder if it's just because there are so many people with cameras filming the night sky that you're either seeing, maybe they're really seeing something, or at the very least, the incidence of people who think they have seen something has gotten a lot higher.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm speculating here, but that would be my guess.
We can get in some real brain rot topics here. We can tell you. I ask because one of the primary theories going around right now is that UFOs is AI incarnate, like a physical form of AI creating either itself to move around inside of the physical space, which also delves into time travel and other real fringe topics, right? I mean, we dive into all of it here, we really do. So I was just wondering if you had heard anything like that or had a
I haven't.
on it.
The only perspective I'll offer on UFOs and extraterrestrial life that has always stuck with me is a thing that years and years and years ago, a team of academics who study space were explaining to me about the sheer size of space and also how old the universe is.
Yeah.
And as a result, so there's this thing, the Fermi Paradox, which you probably know about, which is right. Enrico Fermi, right, one of the fathers of the atomic bomb. He just would idly chat with his lunch group, and one of the things he would always ask is, "Where is everybody? Where is alien life elsewhere in the world, in the universe? Because clearly there's so much potential for it to be there. Why isn't it out there?" Well, the best answer anyone has come up with that makes mathematical sense to answer the Fermi Paradox is, it's not that there isn't extraterrestrial life out there. It's that the universe is so old and the amount of time in the universe is so vast that the chance that out of all of these stars, two civilizations would exist at the same time is very mathematically small. So the idea that in all this darkness, the single match flame that is our civilization, right? That lights and is extinguished instantly in the time scale of the universe. The chance that two of those would be lit together at the same time, such that they overlap and actually see one another, is incredibly tiny. So for me, that's something I've hung on to in my career for a long time. When people talk about extraterrestrial life, is I think to myself, it makes absolute sense to me that it's out there, It just may have already happened or hasn't happened yet, such that we would ever encounter it.
Yeah, you've actually touched on multiple answers to the Fermi paradox there. I always like to plug books again. If anybody's interested in a really good read for answers to the Fermi paradox, there is a book by Stephen Webb. It's called "If the Universe is Teeming with Aliens, Where Is Everybody?" 75 solutions to the Fermi paradox.
Oh, cool.
And it's probably one of my most read books. I constantly go to it and use it for reference.
Cool.
And then, of course, just to tie it all in, the 76th solution was actually a recent thing, which is the one that's brought up in the Third Body Problem series by author Six and Yu, where he talks about the dark forest theory. So that's another one that's not covered in Stephen Webb's book. That's also very interesting, which you didn't necessarily touch on that one. You more or less there's a answer called the island, right? Where we're just alone on an island, and all we have is basically, if you look at the Earth, all we have is the materials here on the Earth. We don't have the ways of manufacturing what we need to be able to bend space-time and travel vast distances within one lifespan, right? So where we are is where we're going to be. Distances are too far. Time is too limited. Unless you can go through and somehow manipulate one of Einstein's theories of relativity via bending of space or black hole manipulation, you're not going to really do much. And even that is theoretical at best.
Yeah. Right.
So
right. I'll just leave you with this idea that I started the book with, which is the idea of the generation ship, which is this concept that gets kicked around at NASA, and there's a couple of science fiction books that have taken this idea on, and it's the whole idea that so the nearest habitable planet to us, the one that they think we actually could walk around on and possibly breathe the atmosphere, is called Proxima Centauri b, and it's only like 4.3 light years away. It's right down the block in terms of being nearby. The trouble is that 4.3 light years away, at the current speeds we can travel in space, ends up being something like it's more than 100,000 years. It's like 200,000 years. So the concept is that you would have to have people on that ship live and die and have babies and continue to create a culture that just lives right on that ship for that whole period of time. It's like 2,000 human generations. And so I've used this as like my example of like where we're at on this planet is like that amount of time is essentially the entire time that we've been that species that walked off of the continent of Africa and became the modern selves with our better brains. The possibility of actually living all that time on a single ship is crazy. And instead, it makes me think we are on that ship. Like, this is our ship. This is the one we get. We're on it already. And we got to figure out how to do a better job of thinking in advance, thinking in generations. You guys were asking about like what's going to happen in a few generations, right? Like we need to think that way. We're not thinking that way right now. We're thinking in financial quarters, and we need to be thinking a lot longer than that, it seems to me.
Proxima Centauri is very interesting. For food for thought for people who are listening, Proxima Centauri was once considered a dual star system, and then they ended up finding a third traveling star that actually orbited the two that are orbiting themselves. And then, I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat said that, and then when the ship gets there, it's just a bunch of inbred.
Yeah, totally. I saw that. So I have
cracking up.
I have a like half-written screenplay in which that's exactly the concept. Did you guys ever watch In the Name of the Rose? It was an early Sean Connery movie. It's a great movie about medieval. It's a murder mystery set in a medieval monastery, and everybody is super inbred. So they're all just like, and you would just imagine at the very end of that trip, as they're approaching the planet, they're all just going to be like so messed up. It's so gross.
They're gonna look like Sloth from the Goonies.
Totally, and they're all like naked because all the
Yeah.
all the clothing is melted away. Like that's right, exactly. It'd be a messy party.
Well, was there anything that you came on to try and specifically talk about today, so we're not wasting all of the time on fantastical stuff about UFOs and
No, we've
space
done it,
travel
you
and
guys.
stuff?
I love hearing your perspectives on the macroeconomic trends here, and on whether these systems really can replace jobs, that as we have them right now. No, I think we've done a really good job. I would say, if you don't mind me, promoting my own stuff. Yeah, the ripcurrent.com is where people can sign up for my podcast if they'd like to listen. I do a weekly interview with somebody who, the rip current is named for like the invisible forces that I think are kind of working on us right now. And that's stuff like, that's like AI, that's all these weird political trends moving us here and there. It's economic forces. So each week is a different sort of expert in something along those lines. So I think it's very similar to what you guys are thinking about here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
No, it's awesome. This was a blast, really.
Yeah, good episode for sure. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time. Hope to do it again.
Absolutely,
cool.
anytime. I'm gonna go ahead and sign us off. If you could hang out for 2 or 3 more minutes afterwards, that way I can just make sure all of your audio and video are sent over.
Yep.
Usually it's really quick, but every once in a while that just takes a few
No,
extra minutes.
I've been there. I'll absolutely stick around.
All right, Jacob, is there anything else that you would like to plug, or anything other than the Rip Current?
Again, theripcurrent.com. Come check us out if you can. I'm for some reason my biggest following is on TikTok. I have a huge TikTok following, which is, for an old guy, it makes no sense to me at all, but I really enjoy that community, and so come check me out there. That's where I'm most active. I'm trying to grow my YouTube, but I'm not doing a smart job of that. So I gotta shift toward that if I can. But yeah, ripcurrent.com. That's what I mostly care about.
We do have one question from the chat
Hit me.
that popped up. The Moore asked what got him into conspiracies. How long ago?
So when you're the editor-in-chief of Popular Science magazine, you really can't avoid them. You'll have people. It's very interesting. You'll have people, full of it's Popular Science. The readership is, it tends to be a lot of military people. We got a lot of Navy. I think a lot of people, you'd have people serving on a submarine, right, who are at sea for a long time, and that's kind of one of their only forms of entertainment is magazines. So they'd have us with them, and so just a really interesting group of people. A lot of people would come to us with a lot of various interesting questions, and so I think that got me going on it. And then you combine that with then all this reporting I've done around kind of why certain ideas really stick in the brain, and that brings you into contact with a lot of folks who think about conspiracy theories as well.
You
Cool.
put a smart guy in front of this information, it's just natural. You just become a conspiracy theorist.
Maybe so. That's right.
Well, good. Well, I'll make sure to tag you in all the TikTok clips that we get from this episode, and
Appreciate it.
We'll spread the word. I can't wait for your book to come in. I'm sure I'll have a ton of questions afterwards. So if you ever want to come back on the show, you're more than welcome, man.
Sounds great. Yeah, just call me up. I'm around. Thank you.
All right.
All right, guys.
All right. Jake, you got anything for Jake?
No, but this whole thing has been tripping me out a little bit. It's like Jake.
Between this and your LASIK eyes, you must be having a trippy evening.
Yeah. I'm ready for bed too. It's my bedtime. I got to go work on planes tomorrow.
Good.
But no,
All right.
it was a cool episode. Definitely not what I expected. Yeah, I would love to have you back on. That was interesting to hear your insights.
Sick. Thanks, guys.
And another
then-
Californian is cool too. I'm from Fresno.
Oh, see?
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome.
And then next time we'll make sure we have some even wilder questions, something to make you real think, right?
Yeah, you went easy on me tonight. I know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that has been another episode of the Infinite Rabbit Hole podcast. Until next time, travelers, we'll see you in the next fork in the path of the Infinite Rabbit Hole. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Bye.